Dame Lucia, former Governor General of St. Lucia, Minister Alva Baptiste, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Lisa Joaye, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, Mrs. Alexis and family, Honorable Claudius Francis, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Ambassador for the Republic of China on Taiwan, Ambassador Peter Chen and Mrs. Chen, Senator George Goddard, Deputy Councilor of the Taiwanese Embassy, Maya Wang, Mayor of Castries, Her Worship Geraldine Lendo Gabriel, Mayor of Rosalie, His Worship Egbert Lucien and Mrs. Lucien, councillors and staff of the Rosalie Constituency Council, Chairperson of the Babonneau Constituency Council, Mrs. Gasper, specially and virtually invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I want to begin by saying thank you for being patient during our technical difficulties. Thank you for joining us in person and virtually as we broadcast from the Vladimir Lucien Theatre at the Rosalie Human Resource Development Center. It's Friday, August 4th, 2023, and we have congregated to commemorate the 50th anniversary of CARICOM. The Caribbean Community CARICOM is a grouping of 20 developing countries. It comprises 15 member states and 5 associate members. It comprises a multilingual, predominantly youthful population of about 16 million citizens. We span from Bahamas in the north to Guyana, Suriname in the south. CARICOM is the oldest surviving or longest surviving integration movement in the developing world, and its core pillars for regional integration include economic integration, foreign policy coordination, human and social development, and security. Our coordinated foreign policies and single market functions have resulted in several regional successes in health, education, culture, and security. On July 4th, 1973, the Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed, and that established CARICOM. So, about a month ago, the member states vibrantly celebrated CARICOM, and regional observations continue to date. I am Lavonne Goudant Daisy, and I am your mistress of ceremony this evening. Our lecture is themed with the CARICOM, 50 years of service to ordinary Caribbean citizens. The lecture will be delivered by a progressive, respected, and traveled son of Rosalie. But before he is introduced, please join me in welcoming Mayor Egbert Lucien to the lectern to issue the official welcome remarks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dame Lucia, former Governor, Lucia. Honorable Alva Baptiste, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Our distinguished presenter, Dr. Armstrong Alexis. Honorable Kenson Casimir, District Representative and Minister for Youth and Sports. Senator Lisa Joaye. Ambassador Peter Chen, Ambassador Peter Chen of the Republic of Taiwan. Mrs. Maya Wang, Deputy Councillor at the Taiwanese Embassy. The Honorable Claudius Francis, Speaker of the House of Assembly. Senator George Goddard, Mayor of Castries, Her Worship Geraldine Lendo Gabriel. Chairperson of the Babonneau Constituency Council, Mrs. Gasper. I take particular pleasure in bidding all of you welcome in what promises to be a very special evening. I know many of you are still in a celebratory mood, as this is the time of year when we celebrate a very important event in the history of our people, that of emancipation. This year, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which gave birth to the regional organization known as CARICOM. Some of you in the audience were not yet born when CARICOM came into being. Some of us may take its existence and the role that it plays in the region for granted. Some of us may even question its relevance to the well-being of our region and its people. Tonight, our esteemed presenter, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, the Deputy Secretary General for CARICOM, takes us on a journey that promises to be insightful and provocative, and will hopefully answer some of those gnawing questions and disabuse us of some of our unflattering notions of that august institution. Dr. Armstrong Alexis is no stranger to us here in Gros. He is, in fact, a son of this soil and has for many years been actively involved in the community. We are proud of his accomplishments and are happy to share him with the region and indeed the world. As tempting as it may be for me to offer a few words about Dr. Alexis, on this particular occasion, I must defer to one who, by virtue of the familial relationship with Dr. Alexis, is more worthy than I, and who has very fittingly been designated the honor and privilege of that role. I thank you all for joining us here this evening, and once again bid you all a very special welcome to our celebrated town of Gros, and to this important and timely lecture as we as a people look towards charting our destiny. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Lucia. You said many things, and the comments about some of us not being born before CARICOM resonates with me, but yes, thank you for the welcome, Mr. Lucia, Mayor Lucia. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you're comfortable. I want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Benson Kazumi, Parliamentary Representative for Rosalie and Minister for Youth Development and Sports. I hope that you're comfortable and ready for some mental stimulation, and we now transition to the most anticipated part of the program, and I solicit the assistance of Mr. Janai Alexis to help me formally introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janai Alexis, son of Armstrong Alexis. Just as handsome.
I was just telling you that.
As we sit here today, we gotta think and ask ourselves, what are the odds? What are the odds that a young man that was born right here in Gros, that did common entrance, and unlike some of us in here, did not pass for college, but passed for Corinth, and then finish off at SDA? What are the odds that that same man moves along and gets his first degree from UE? What are the odds that that guy also gets his master's from UE, then goes and says, I need a little more, and gets an MBA from Durham University in the UK, and then adds doctor in front of his name and gets his doctoral in business administration from Warren University? What are the odds that that same man that was rooted in this community and did so much work in this community goes on and helps found NYC? What are the odds that that same man, that when he is in UE, is the head of the guild? What are the odds that this young man that started teaching right across the street here at 17 years old, teaching 14 years old, so he had kids in his class that were 14, he was 17. He was teaching his partners, basically. What are the odds that that young man becomes the director of youth and sports? What are the odds that that young man moves on and becomes a regional director of CYP? What are the odds that that young man moves into UNDP and just starts to stack on the wins? He becomes the operations manager of UNDP in Barbados, deputy country director, and as an interim in Haiti, special operations advisor in Nigeria, functional deputy to the resident rep in Samoa, coordinator of program and operations at UNDP in Fiji, the deputy rep, the deputy res rep in Suriname, the deputy res rep again in Namibia, and now in his current post as the Deputy Secretary General. Dr. Alexis oversees the corporate services and functional management at the Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Jean-Roselyn, my father, the man I love and man I love, the only man that I look up to and want to be exactly like, Dr. Armstrong Alexis.
Okay, you kept asking me questions all week and I did not realize why these questions were being asked. With protocols already established, and given the fact that we're starting a bit late, please permit me to simply say good evening to all of our dignitaries, our members of Parliament, Speaker, my family, friends, and all those who are interested in this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, it really is a distinct pleasure for me as an original Jamosili to be addressing you here in the heart of our beloved district. Gros has produced outstanding citizens for many of us, coming back and contributing to the upliftment of our village that raised its children is nothing short of a humble recognition of our love for our hometown. I'm fully cognizant that I address you tonight within the hallowed walls of the Vladimir Lucian Theatre, named after a young Jamosili who has blazed the trails of scholastic brilliance, artistic excellence, and outstanding literary competence to become one of the Caribbean's most recognized and accomplished literary icons of our modern Caribbean civilization. We stand on the shoulders of giants in our community of Grosili, who helped shape the early years of fermentation of a Grosili identity. Community leaders such as Ignatius Felicien, Samuel Lucien, Augustine Alexis, outstanding sports personalities such as Tony Storm Festal, Canis Louis, and Carol Moyes, entrepreneurs such as Willie Bowley, Scotty, and Jerome Copat Montout, and religious leaders whom our parents oftentimes sent us to their homes to pray, have all contributed towards a Grosili that today stands tall as the most progressive district in the entire of this country, St. Lucia, and arguably the West. I therefore feel privileged, and with the deepest sense of humility and sincerity, I wish to thank the Grosili Constituency Council for inviting me to share some thoughts with you this evening. Thanks to all of you in the audience and online for taking time to be a part of this rather auspicious event tonight. I want to start by asking whether anyone in the audience can recall July 3rd, 1973. This was a day that 4 leaders in the Caribbean, Prime Minister Errol Barrow of Barbados, Prime Minister Forbes Burnham of British Guyana, Prime Minister Michael Manley of Jamaica, and the host Prime Minister Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago, all immortalized as founding fathers of regionalism, met in the town of Chaguaramas in Trinidad to sign the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which gave birth to the Caribbean Community and Common Market, and which we fondly now refer to as CARICOM. Having announced the withdrawal of his country, Trinidad and Tobago, from the 1958 established federation, Prime Minister Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago proposed at the time the creation of a Caribbean community. He subsequently convened a meeting of leaders of Barbados, British Guyana, and Jamaica, which gave birth to CARICOM's predecessor, CARIFTA. And on July 3rd, 1973, the Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed, thereby establishing the Caribbean Community and Common Market. Now, whilst we often overlook the significance of the full title of the Caribbean Community and Common Market, it is important to recognize that up to today, we have one member state that is a member of the Caribbean community, but not a member of the Common Market. Given that the purpose of this lecture is not to go into the bosom of the nuances of membership of CARICOM, I shall only state here that as a community, we represent sovereign states whilst espousing the benefits of working collaboratively to address pressing needs, to capitalize on economies of scale, and to promote one Caribbean identity. In Article 6 of the treaty, which establishes CARICOM, and its subsequent 2001 revision, it is stated that the objectives of CARICOM are to improve the standards of living and work, to achieve full employment of labor and other factors of production, to accelerate, coordinate, and sustain economic development and convergence, to expand trade and economic relations with third states, to organize for increased production and productivity, to achieve a greater measure of economic leverage and effectiveness of member states in dealing with the third states, or with third states, with groups of states and entities of any description, to enhance coordination of member states' foreign and foreign economic policies, to enhance functional cooperation, including the achievement of efficient operations of common services and activities for the benefit of its people, the promotion of greater understanding among its people, and the advancement of the social, cultural, and technological development, and the intensification of activities in areas such as health, education, transport, and telecommunications. I am certain you will agree with me that any critical review of the accomplishments of CARICOM will result in mixed propositions, but there will be a significant preponderance of opinion favoring the view that the community has not achieved all that it was set out to accomplish. In his 2015 lecture titled "Delivered or Denied: The Dividends of Integration," Dr. Kenny Anthony, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia and Prime Minister at the time when the statement was made, indicated that the Caribbean is and has for too long been stalled at the crossroads of indecision, stalled for so long that we are in danger of becoming anachronistic, literally out of time and out of step with the rest of the world, unquote. Whilst being interviewed by Oscar Ramjeet in 2010, the quintessential regionalist Sir Sridhar Ramphal is reputed to have said, and I quote, "The heads of government and CARICOM have to recapture the vision that led a generation of Caribbean leaders to the understanding that we have to have functional unity if we are to meet the challenges of the 21st century. We have seemed to have lost our way in governance at the regional level, in economic integration, which is the heartbeat of CARICOM. We have lost our inspiration within the developing world, and perhaps worst of all, the people of the Caribbean, or Caribbean people, are losing their faith in the political leadership of the region," unquote. These were the words of Sir Sridhar Ramphal. Before I delve into the meat of my presentation, I should remind you that the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas identifies 3 pillars, and I think Laborde went through these, as providing the framework for CARICOM regional integration. The first one is full economic integration, and that is to be achieved through the implementation of the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, the CSME. Functional cooperation, which embraces working together in several areas such as health, education, sports, culture, etc., that contribute to the enhancement of the quality of life of our Caribbean peoples. And thirdly, the coordination of foreign policy and external economic relations which seek to find common ground on individual national positions and on a myriad of hemispheric and international issues of great importance to the community. And in 2017, the heads added a fourth pillar, which is crime and security. That was added by the heads of government to provide for a multilateral response to crime and security priorities in the region. In order to give relevance to the theme of this lecture, I have to firstly define ordinary citizen. I use the Cambridge Dictionary, which defines ordinary as not different or special or unexpected in any way, and citizen as a person who is a member of a particular country and who has rights because of being born there or because of being given those rights. An ordinary citizen, therefore, is a person who is a member of a particular country, and in this case, the region, who is not different or special in any way, but who has rights because of being born in the region or because of being given those rights. I apply this definition, of course, to the citizens of the Caribbean community. How, therefore, has CARICOM served the ordinary citizen over its 50-year lifespan? To answer this question, or the answer to this question, can first be found in the revised Treaty of Chagaramas, the document that establishes CARICOM. The positions of the treaty, the provisions rather of the treaty, secure for ordinary CARICOM citizens rights such as being able to move freely within the community, the right to establish businesses, the right to live and work in any of the member states of CARICOM, and the right to engage in non-wage activities in any member state of the community. It is important, however, for citizens to be seized with both the knowledge of and familiarity with the provisions of the treaty that guarantees them these and other rights. You see, ladies and gentlemen, CARICOM cannot be of service to the ordinary citizen if the ordinary citizen is not aware of the rights that he or she possesses and that he or she does not even attempt to exercise these rights. We therefore stumble upon a major challenge, that of communication and public education, which is critical yet woefully inadequate if we are to ensure that the ordinary citizen understands the benefits of CARICOM to him or her. CARICOM has been under a bushel, hidden from the sight of the ordinary citizen for far too long. I like to think of regional integration as a journey and not a destination. And based on that prism, integration is never complete. If we accept regional integration as a journey, then we can accept that the right to stay for a period of 6 months is a solid foundation to build on, which is encapsulated in the slogan of the 50th anniversary of CARICOM, which is 50 years strong, a solid foundation to build on. I am sure you are aware that at the just concluded 45th conference of the CARICOM heads of government in Trinidad in July 3rd, from July 3rd to 5th, 2023, heads agreed to full free movement by March 2024. I will be returning to that in a while. Notwithstanding the paucity of information to educate the public on how the ordinary citizen stands to benefit from CARICOM, the governments of the member states of CARICOM have in some measure facilitated the exercising of the rights of the ordinary citizen by putting some measures in place for these rights to have meaning. I shall focus on a few examples that I am certain, though readily in existence, evades the consciousness of the ordinary citizen. Let us start by extending the definition of the ordinary citizen to nationals of CARICOM member states who travel the region. And then we will see that those rights that these citizens are accorded through some practical arrangements that have been put in place to facilitate them. As a result of a decision by the heads of government, and that is where we start, all CARICOM nationals, every single one of us, have the right to enter another CARICOM member state for an automatic stay of 6 months, irrespective of the reasons for the visit. Insignificant as this may seem, it is a critical benefit, particularly for ordinary citizens who may have family ties in other countries of the region and who from time to time may have reason to require an extended stay in a sister nation in our region. When you travel, my brothers and sisters, as CARICOM citizens, you receive an automatic 6-month stamp, even if you're only going to Barbados for your visa for a day and a half. So just check out your stamps and you realize that it is never less than 6 months. And if it is, then someone has violated your right as a CARICOM citizen. And there is recourse. There is something called the CCJ. Did I say it correctly?
Go for it, no.
And just as my friend Minister Baptiste has always warned me, sometimes technology fails us. So please just give me a quick second. Perhaps the greatest value of the regional integration effort is free movement of people. This is the barometer often used by the ordinary citizen in the assessment of how well we have done as a region. And the public sentiment around how far we have come is oftentimes the pivot for other considerations about CARICOM and its development. I really have to stop here for a quick second. My computer has just frozen on me.
Always have the back of people. See the back of people?
Perhaps the greatest value of the regional integration effort is free movement of people. This is the barometer often used by the ordinary citizen in the assessment of how well we have done as a region, and public sentiment around how far we have come is oftentimes the pivot for other considerations about CARICOM's success. We can all recall the legal matter of Shanique Myrie versus the state of Barbados. I'm sure you can all remember that. In which Ms. Myrie, a Jamaican citizen, claimed that on March 14th, 2011, her right to enter Barbados was violated. Ms. Myrie contended that, 1, the treatment she was subjected to by border officials upon arriving at the Barbados airport and her denial of entry into Barbados amounted to a serious breach of her right to free movement under Article 45 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and a decision of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community taken at the 28th meeting in 2007. She also contended that the body cavity search to which she was subjected violated her fundamental rights and freedoms. And thirdly, she claimed that she was singled out and treated less favorably than other nationals based on her Jamaican nationality, contrary to Article 7 and Article 8 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The court, the CCJ, found that Barbados had breached Ms. Myrie's right to enter Barbados and ordered that she be paid pecuniary and non-pecuniary damages. In other words, Ms. Myrie won the case against the state of Barbados. Now that's a lesson there right away, because for many people, especially young people, we keep saying how the system is so big and we can't challenge the system. And we surrender our rights many times. And here it is that a Jamaican woman challenged the system and won. And that has become a fundamental part of regional integration, because thereafter, every member state understood that the Caribbean Court of Justice would not play around when it comes to the rights of ordinary citizens as enshrined in the revised Treaty of Chatham-Islands. We are a region with an entrepreneurial ethos, and many of the businesses that operate in the Caribbean are indigenous, Caribbean-owned, managed and operated enterprises. We are all too familiar with company names such as C.O. Williams, Massey, Rituals Coffee House, and Surgical Financial Corporation, which operate across many Caribbean states. Under Article 32 of the revised Treaty of Chatham-Islands, nationals of member states of the Caribbean community have the right to establish companies, set up agencies, open branches, and have subsidiary agents in the territory of another member state. In other words, in the territory where that individual does not originate from. So if you're Grenadian, you have that right to establish a branch of your business in Dominica. A citizen of a CARICOM member state who established a business in his or her home country is entitled to business expansion in other CARICOM member states with guaranteed treaty protections, such as the right to establish a business, or in other words, the right to create and manage economic enterprises, the right to provide services, and the right to move capital. You will note that Article 33 of the revised treaty states, and I quote, subject to the provisions of Article 221 and 222, these are two articles dealing with matters being brought before the Caribbean Court of Justice, the member states shall remove restrictions on all the rights, on the right of establishment of nationals of member states in the territory of another member state. Any hindrance that exists, this particular article, Article 33, calls on member states to remove any hindrance that might exist. It is also noteworthy that businesses are protected against double taxation, effectively permitting the non-payment of a regime of taxes to another member state in order to facilitate the free movement of capital and the establishment of businesses in another territory. But why do we need a treaty to allow us to move freely and to establish businesses, if we so wish, in the region? I'm sure that's a question going through your mind. Have we not always moved freely from one territory to another? Why is it that before CARICOM, in every one of the islands of the Caribbean, we've always known nationals of other Caribbean countries, living and working in our home country? I remember the days growing up in Gros, and there was a guy we called Beige. You know, he became Uncle Beige, Mr. Beige, Cousin Beige. Where did the name Beige come from? Because he was from Barbados. So why do we need CARICOM? Why do we need CSME if we have always been moving all the time? I doubt it would be considered unreasonable if one were to ask whether the institutionalization of an organic practice such as cross-territorial existence has helped or hindered the free movement of citizens of the Caribbean. In his inaugural speech to a CARICOM conference of heads of government in March 2000, the late Rosie Douglas, then Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, admonished his fellow heads and stated, and bear with me, this is a pretty long quote. Firstly, it does not require a rocket scientist to determine that individual microstates in the Caribbean stand little chance of achieving the aspirations of their people if they stand alone and operate like Leibnizian monarchs, locked up in themselves and incapable of relating to others. Caribbean leaders have talked the talk of union and its benefits to the entire region, from the halcyon days of the Caribbean Labour Congress in 1947. Over a half century later, our leaders were still darily repeating the same cliches about unity, the sole difference being that these statements are now dressed up in the bureaucratic jargon that seems to be a fashion of the new millennium. Take, for example, and this is Rosie Douglas continuing, take, for example, the freedom of movement of persons. In 1957, at the pre-federal conference in Trinidad and Tobago, this matter was hotly debated by the leaders of our region, who agreed that it was a sine qua non for regional integration. Rosie continues. At that time, the vocabulary used was that of a federal union. Little has been done by way of positive governmental action. Looking at the Caribbean today, ordinary men and women have been moving from island to island on their own volition in the majority of circumstances illegally. They have been living, working, loving, marrying persons from other islands and are happily integrated. This aspect of integration is taking place not because of, in spite of the ineffectiveness of the leaders of this region in taking the necessary steps to bring it into fruition. Our leaders must not be obstacles to what ordinary men and women in the Caribbean want. That is to be associated with each other at work and at play. We must take the necessary steps to legally effectuate this reality. It is fundamental that governments exist to serve human beings and not to deal in abstractions. Rosie continues, let us release the energies of the people of this region in this ever-expanding world of trade liberalization and globalization by freeing them to live and work wherever they choose. End of quote. Given Douglas's admonition and what we know to be the natural predisposition of Caribbean people, our sense of regionalism remains a solid part of our fiber, whilst we no doubt espouse nationhood, what Anthony Payne refers to as the simultaneous stamp of integration and fragmentation. This is particularly so since the era of political independence from our respective colonial oppressors. And no, colonization did not have a conscience. Certainly not a conscience that sought to liberate the oppressed. In the pedagogy of the oppressed, the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire reminds us that oppression, and by extension, colonialism, is dehumanizing. But then again, Freire advised that only the oppressed can save themselves from the oppressor. Only the oppressed can save themselves and the oppressor from oppression. And liberation must come with the oppressed, who must work their way through thought of a critical understanding of reality, which leads to action. But I have to admit I digress. So Rosie Douglas's pregnant desire for the formalization of that which has been occurring organically is about to be delivered. In delivering the decision of the heads of government in July 2023, the Prime Minister of Dominica and chairman of the Conference of Heads stated, and I quote, "We believe that this is a fundamental part of the integration architecture, and at 50, we could not leave Trinidad and Tobago and not speak about the core regional integration movement, that is, people's ability to move freely within the Caribbean community," unquote. The heads of government have indeed now made the decision, and it is yet to be seen in terms of its full implementation, that effective the end of March 2024, we shall be able to move. What this means is that the single community space, which was the desire of the founding fathers of CARICOM all those many years ago, will finally be achieved, and ordinary citizens will be able to move freely without the limitations of how much time one can spend in another member state of the community. Attendant to full free movement will be factors such as access to services, as guaranteed, for example, through guaranteed secondary education, primary health care, and other social services. We all wait with bated breath for that day when a simple photo ID will be all that we need to move within our Caribbean space. Caribbean citizens share a keen sense of community that is anchored in the socio-psychological understanding of what it is to be Caribbean or West Indian. Although I have to admit that our recent performance as a West Indies team is causing some of us to give up on our long-held spirit of dominance and superiority. It can therefore be argued that this sense of Caribbeanness precedes the formalizing of the CARICOM project, and in fact, it is its origin and the reason why the political grouping was hatched in full recognition of the grassroots bottom-up movement of people-propelled regionalism in an interesting twist where the people seem to have led the leaders. We can agree, ladies and gentlemen, that much of the operational and treaty obligatory undertakings of CARICOM do not register on the minds of the ordinary citizen who goes along his or her daily life, and this can be the result of many coexisting things. When I asked a group of friends only last week, what does CARICOM mean to you as an ordinary citizen? One person responded by saying, and I quote, "As an ordinary citizen, CARICOM means my island home is part of a group together with the wider region. I think the group led to transformation within the economic and education sectors. While some of the decisions made by leaders have impacted my nation, I am not fully aware of what it means to belong to that group. How does it affect me as an individual? I recall conversations, though vaguely, about a common market and free movement of people. However, I go about my business daily totally oblivious of how I am at all impacted as an individual. Thus, I must conclude that I have very little understanding of what the organization does for us as a people, and I intend to correct that as soon as possible. If I don't, then CARICOM will just continue to be a name which I know, but with which I cannot readily identify. A name which I can't claim affinity to. A name to which does not readily arouse loyalty or ownership, unquote. And that's the response I got from a friend. In this response from my friend lies two objective realities. A, despite its achievements, CARICOM means little unless we are able to connect our daily lives with the work of the organization, the work that the organization does on behalf of the citizens of the community. And B, we are ineffective in communicating with the public what we do and how our service benefits them. Some course correction is therefore required, and no better way to do that than to articulate some tangible areas in which CARICOM has served and continues to serve ordinary citizens of the Caribbean. Let me start with a daily and rather routine activity that members of households engage in on a daily basis, on a weekly basis perhaps, and that is going to the supermarket and purchasing items off the shelf. Given the revised treaty, tariffs are placed on goods that originate from outside the CARICOM region. In other words, in order to safeguard the promotion of regionally produced goods and goods originating from a non-CARICOM country, is subject to a special tariff. Such a tariff is designed to ensure that the regional demand is first satisfied through Caribbean products. Whenever the market can be satisfied from CARICOM-produced products, merchants are not allowed to import from outside the region. Now, where a product is not being produced in the community, or where the quantity of the product being produced in the community does not satisfy the regional demand, or where the quality of the product being produced in the community is below the community standard, CARICOM may authorize the importation from outside the community. With such arrangements, particularly now that the challenges being experienced with global supply chains, items produced within the region is more likely to benefit from more responsive and shorter distribution chains. Not to mention, of course, the assumption that regionally produced goods should theoretically be cheaper than those produced internationally. And I'm saying theoretically because sometimes economies of scale can disrupt those factors. So, an interesting thing that happens on a weekly basis, an importer may apply through his Ministry of Trade, may apply for the importation of bananas. That request is submitted by the receiving Ministry of Trade to the CARICOM Secretariat. There is a turnaround time of, I think, 5 days. The CARICOM Secretariat then sends that information to every member state of CARICOM through a saving grant, saying that importer X from country Y has applied for the importation of bananas from outside the region. Member states will then respond by saying there are no known suppliers of bananas in the region, or there are suppliers in the region and we can supply, or might say we have suppliers but we have orders and therefore we cannot meet that particular order. And some countries will simply not respond. A non-response is considered a response in that case. And what happens then is the Secretariat will then sign the exemption and inform the Ministry of Trade, who then informs the applicant that you may or may not import from overseas. So when we go to the supermarkets and we see goods on the shelves, and we always say, well, we see so many foreign goods on the shelf, there is a process. It is either that the quantity produced in the Caribbean is not sufficient, there is actually no supplier from the region, countries did not respond, or a number of other factors. Another example of service to ordinary citizens is in the realm of telecommunications, and in particular roaming costs. I know many of you will be very interested in that one. It is a source of constant frustration to ordinary CARICOM citizens that exorbitant roaming fees are charged where one travels from one Caribbean territory to another. The same companies that charge an unacceptably high fee to roam within the region have established companies in Europe, for example. And European citizens can navigate the entire European space without having to pay a roaming fee. And you have to ask yourself why. You know, there's a theory about blacklisting. I think it was the Prime Minister of Bahamas that says that the blacklisting seems to be the listing of countries run by black leaders. So the very company that allows the European citizens to move around Europe, which is a larger geographic space and certainly a larger population than the Caribbean, will not charge roaming fees to move to, from France to Belgium and Germany to Portugal. It's, like making a local call. But if you move from St. Lucia to St. Vincent, St. Lucia to Barbados, you pay roaming fees. And we argue that this is not right. Equally, an American who has traveled to St. Croix, an island in the Caribbean, pays no roaming fees from the United States or from mainland United States. But if you travel from St. Lucia or any other CARICOM country to St. Croix, you are burdened with the costs that are simply unjustifiable in a modern e-based interconnected world. You may ask, well, why is that happening? But through the Regional Institution on Telecommunications, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the community has successfully negotiated better roaming rates with two major providers in the Caribbean, namely Cable and Wireless and Digicel. A declaration which was signed in Grenada in February 2022 requires the telecommunications companies to recognize that the unpredictable cost of mobile roaming serves as a deterrent for CARICOM citizens who use their mobile phones as they travel through the region. The declaration also recognizes that CARICOM citizens sometimes suffer what is called bill shock. You get a bill and you're shocked when you see that bill. CARICOM citizens sometimes suffer bill shock at the end of a CARICOM trip. Thirdly, roaming charges could be more transparent and affordable because you just get a charge, we don't know what it is based on, you know, so that needs to be more transparent. And fourthly, the ability to roam among Caribbean states at reasonable cost is an essential characteristic in promoting greater connectivity within the CARICOM single ICT space and CARICOM single market and economy. I just suffered the same problem again. Minister, I will take your advice on this. Am I roaming from Guyana?
Adopt them so they can teach it up.
The declaration, which was signed in St. George's, Grenada in February 2022, also secured the commitment of the companies to implement the new roaming model, which will be set out in the respective proposals that the companies are to submit. The companies are also to honor the principles and conditions contained in the proposals. They need to implement those proposals. They were required to implement those proposals by the end of 2022 and to provide semi-annual updates in relation to the status of implementation of their proposals. They were also required to advise the CARICOM team on any subsequent intended changes to their proposals in a timely manner. Now, if you travel the region, you probably have recognized that your roaming fees are indeed a bit lower now. The intention is to eliminate roaming altogether, but as the good diplomats will tell you, everything is a negotiated process. So there is an end in sight, but we have started with demanding lower roaming rates. These measures serve to benefit ordinary citizens, albeit those who travel the region in a major and significant way. Those of you in the arts, and I'm moving to another example. Those of you in the arts will be familiar with the biennial hosting of the Caribbean's biggest cultural festival called CARIFESTA. Since the 1970s, CARICOM has provided an unparalleled space for creatives to place their artistic prowess on display. For many cultural performing, visual, and literary artists across the Caribbean, their first opportunity to perform before a substantive, appreciative audience was at the CARIFESTA. St. Lucian creatives, for example, have benefited from these unique opportunities, and many have had their talents recognized by partners outside the region. For many creatives, sometimes it was even their first time traveling overseas. The plays and dramatic presentations at CARIFESTA put the best among us on display and has become a pillar of our unique Caribbean cultural identity. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, has derailed us a bit, and the CARIFESTA has not been held in a few years. We are hoping, however, to stage another edition of this iconic cultural festival in the coming year or two. If I was asked to identify one glaring, unambiguous example of our Caribbean identity being shaped by our collective conscience and sense of forward march, I would have to settle on our homegrown education system. When that bold step was made in the 1970s to do away with the Cambridge examination and introduce the Caribbean Examination Council, it was a show of confidence in ourselves and a liberation from the stronghold of an education system that was culturally biased and incapable of shaping the scholastic advancement of our region. Today, decades later, hundreds of thousands of ordinary Caribbean citizens, including myself, have gone on to make their mark in a number of spheres within the region and externally, with the CHCs as the cornerstone of their academic prowess. That is something that we must be proud of. And when we say, what has CARICOM done for me? This is certainly one that I think we can point to as something that perhaps every family has been touched by. Whilst these serve as vivid examples, ladies and gentlemen, to the service meted out by CARICOM to its citizens, the journey continues, and delivering on the promise of a broadened and deepened integration must continue to be our mantra. Our own Prime Minister, Philippe Pierre, reminds us in his remarks delivered at the 43rd meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM in Suriname last year, and I quote, "We must not allow our enforced circumstances of day-to-day survival to dull our memories of the reasons why our past leaders pursued the establishment of the CARICOM single market and economy, and why they saw it as the most optimum answer to the question of what is the next stage of CARICOM development. In light of all the global changes that have taken place in the decades since the initial treaty which established CARICOM," Prime Minister Philippe Pierre continues, "At the center of the thinking behind the CSME was the need to create the conditions for the free movement of people." You see how many times free movement of people is coming up by the leaders? Sometimes we ask why. And the free movement of people and capital, and the need to establish a single economy as a unified space for joint growth and development for Caribbean businesses, and more importantly, for the improvement of the quality of life of Caribbean citizens. Prime Minister Pierre went on to further state that, and I quote, "St. Lucia will always be less than it can be without CARICOM." So ladies and gentlemen, if we want to put this differently and expand it to reflect the whole of CARICOM, we are stronger together, and the unity that defines us is the bedrock upon which the Caribbean we want can be built. So what service has CARICOM been to the ordinary citizen of the Caribbean community? I am certain you will agree with me. You will agree, and with the examples shared this evening, that CARICOM has served us well, but not optimally. There is still a lot to be accomplished. There is still a lot to do. I want us to, as I stated earlier, view regional integration as a journey and not a destination. As I close, I invite you to consider three broad questions. What would the Caribbean be without CARICOM? In other words, does CARICOM matter? Our very own Minister of External Affairs, the Honorable Alva Baptiste, is on record as saying at a CARICOM meeting, "If you believe CARICOM is not working, try a Caribbean without CARICOM." These are the words of Minister Baptiste. The second question for me is, how do we broaden the platform to both inform the public about and be guided by the desires of the ordinary citizen on the impact that CARICOM has had, is having, and can potentially have on the citizens of our community? Thirdly and lastly, I leave this with you. How do we move from rhetoric to reality on the many lofty ideals of the Caribbean unity, which are enshrined in the treaty? Shaping one Caribbean is not the sole responsibility of government. Let me say that again. Yeah. Shaping one Caribbean is not the sole responsibility of government. It is a collective imperative that must be pursued by all, but for which the formal structures of public governance have to provide the impetus. There are many loose ends that, if allowed to continue hanging individually, will not paint the full picture, but banded together will tell a wonderful story of the strides we have made as a community. as immortalized in the words of the song of the late Black Stallion of Trinidad and Tobago. If we only rap to we people and tell them like me, them is one race from the same place that make the same trip on the same ship. So we must push for one intention, for one common intention, is for a better life in the region, for women and the children. That, ladies and gentlemen, must be the ambition of the Caribbean man. The Caribbean man, the Caribbean man. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexis. You spoke about the history of CARICOM, the services of CARICOM, the provisions of the treaty, our rights and obligations as citizens to make best of it. You definitely brought to the fore things that we take for granted that are as a result of CARICOM. And so that I do not dominate the rest of this session, I will move along into the question and answer section. We have one mic, one floating mic. We don't have a stand for it, so you're going to have to pass it around. Okay, so the suggestion is that if you have a question, a suggestion, that you come to the lectern, and Dr. Alexis will respond. So yes, probably we could come around this side of the room, exit around the other, in random order. Come around here.
Thank you, Dr. Alexis, for a wonderful presentation. I'm impressed, and it takes a lot to impress me, trust me. Yeah, my main concern has to do especially with the breakdown of the Act or whatever. And you know, I am a Caribbean man who have traveled the region, and to see that after all these years, that we could end up in a situation like that. You know, it's really, I can't wrap my head around it. And you know, I was having a discussion with some guys a few weeks ago, and I was making a suggestion, and I hope, when the minister is there, I hope he's listening, right? That we have a situation where aviation fuel is available in Trinidad at below market rates, right? Now, that's the last latest that I know. I'm not too sure if that has changed, right? So we have about 4 or 5 fledgling airlines in the Caribbean, and clearly whatever they're doing is not working, right? I mean, it's just out of this world. The costs is just too high. The scheduling is bad. People are having to overnight. They won't pay. So I mean, I think most of us are aware of the host of problems. So I was thinking, why don't we approach the Prime Minister of Trinidad as a Caribbean, as a region, and say, hey, you know, you have Caribbean Airlines, right? Okay? Why don't we use that as our flagship carrier? And the Caribbean can invest, can do a model where we can invest in Caribbean Airlines, where they would be able to get the main ingredient in terms of cost, which is the aviation fuel at your cost. Every station in the Caribbean that the airline lands will get that aviation fuel at that cost. If you want the headquarters, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, right? And let us get Caribbean Airlines to run, or if you want to call it, replace LIAT in terms of the schedule. I'm just wondering, why can't we think of something like that as a region? I mean, you have the aviation fuel, which is a cost, and we can put the thing together and try to get this problem solved. I mean, we have had all the brains, and we have 2 Nobel laureates, we have had all sorts of brilliant minds over the years, and I can't see why we can't do it. So please, if you can help, I would like your suggestions.
I feel like I should pass that question on to the other minister. And civil engagement. But having said that, you know, I've heard those kinds of comments before. It has to be that the challenge is greater than what meets the naked eye. It has to be. Minister Baptiste is here. Minister Baptiste attends the Council of Foreign and Community Relations. He attends heads with the Honorable Prime Minister. He has been a part of the conversation. He attends caucus meetings that I don't attend. But I'm sure he will tell you that there is no lack of commitment by our leaders. I have seen leaders riled up to the point of near anger because they're frustrated with the challenges of regional transport. I really don't know what the immediate answer is, other than to say to you that I am oftentimes in the room when conversations about regional transport is going on, and there are barriers that the heads are grappling with. The fuel is not the only challenge. It is a major one, but it is certainly not the only challenge. The issue with Islet had a lot to do, as many of you would know, with just the kinds of arrangements that were in place, the issues with personnel and unions and that sort of thing. And in order for us to solve the problem with regional transport, we also have to look beyond air transport. Maritime transport. It's the same way that the majority of solutions can swim. It's the same problem we have when we talk transport. We hardly ever factor in, that it is probably quicker to get to Castries from Gros if we have an efficient ferry service. It's probably quicker to get to St. Vincent and the Grenadines if we have an efficient ferry service. All of those matters are currently being discussed. There is actually a CDB study that is being undertaken, and the results should be available anytime soon on the issue of regional transport, which covers maritime and air transport. There is the MASA. Minister, just remind me with it's an arrangement for civil aviation, and that has been in place, and many of the countries are committed to ensuring the implementation of the MASA. So steps have been taken. I hear in your question or your remarks that we need to step up and move much quicker. I certainly agree with you, but I want to reassure you that based on the discussions that are going on now, efforts are being made to address the issue of regional transport. And the companies are also playing their part. So you will recognize that Caribbean Airlines have now started traveling up to the Leeward Islands. I think they just introduced flights to St. Kitts last week. So more and more it's beginning to unfold, but a more comprehensive picture will be painted in the coming months. I think I saw Mr. Charlemagn's hand up as well. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I must say this lecture was exactly what I expected. Very well presented. And I just want to refocus on something that you said earlier about communication and education. I know a lot of people in the region, not just here, when you tell them about CARICOM, the answer is CARICOM? No, CARICOM. In terms of, it's a question of perception of what people think on the ground, the ordinary layman. Probably what I'm saying might not make sense to a lot of people, but if you go by the market now, or you do a Christopher Hunt kind of Lucia's program and you step outside of a building and you ask people about CARICOM, 9 out of 10 might ask you what you're actually even talking about, because they don't really know, their perception is that it has not really advanced our position in the region. So my question, basically, my premise is, what is being done at the level of your institution in terms of changing that perception? Because in my personal view, CARICOM is a great thing and it can achieve great things. But for now, people do not feel that it is doing what it's supposed to do for the ordinary citizen. So my question to you is basically, how are you guys going to go about changing that perception of what people think about CARICOM?
Good question. You know, I attempted to, well, I did raise that in my presentation. Communication is a big problem. It's one of those things where, you know, we show up for work every day, we do our work, and we assume that people know what we're doing. And, you know, the reality is that it's not. And therefore, one of the things that the Secretary General has put in place within the Secretary, the reinforced communications department. We are actually in the process, as we speak, of hiring a communications manager, program manager to head the communications department. We've started producing some programs to educate persons on CARICOM. One of the problems is distribution. So we're actually looking into the possibility of liaising with the various GISs around the region, because these are all government, and therefore programs that are produced by CARICOM will be able to be shared with the respective public information, you know, GISs around the region, and that becomes part of your local content as GIS. So you don't have to be going around searching for local content. CARICOM can help provide some of that information. Another aspect of the work that we do as well is that whenever officials of CARICOM travel, to the extent that time permits, we try to have public gatherings like this one. So I was really happy when the Constituency Council agreed that we could do this public lecture. The Secretary General, when she travels, she visits schools. She works very closely with the CARICOM Youth Ambassador in the respective member state. Every member state has 2 CARICOM Youth Ambassadors appointed by the government. So those efforts are being made. Are they enough? Probably not. But we also have to recognize that some of the issues that CARICOM deals with, whilst they impact the lives of the ordinary person, they don't necessarily occupy the thinking of the ordinary person on a day-to-day basis. So whilst we're busy dealing with roaming charges, for example, it is only when it happens and we go to the communities and we say, if you travel, especially we have students who are, you know, moving from St. Lucia going to the respective territories for higher education. We have people who travel for work. I had a friend, and Mr. Charlemagne knows that friend very well, who traveled from St. Lucia to Guyana. And I mean, bill shock was a serious issue. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. And the company never said to the individual customer, what is really going on here? Your bill is getting out of whack. And the bill was just submitted. You don't do that. That's not acceptable. And like I said, those very companies, when they go to Europe, they allow the Europeans to travel across Europe and they don't charge them roaming fees. So why are those things happening in the region? And we are committed to changing that. We have to be able to communicate those things to the people in a language that they understand. You know, we have to put down all of the technical jargon around what CARICOM does, you know, and speak to people so that they understand what we're doing. So, George, an answer to your question is that attempts are being made, and we also welcome ideas from the public as to how best you would like us to engage you, so that more and more of that kind of activity can take place in an engaging manner. I see a hand up here and a hand up across here.
Good night. Maria Fontanel. I won't give add more compliments, as my voice was said before. In terms of, I have just some suggestions in terms of the education part, because, for example, I know that in many schools, languages are mandatory. At the end of your school life, you provide lessons on readiness for work, etc. These are opportunities that will also be taken where these are mandatory things for students to learn. I mean, Spanish is mandatory, but you don't know about your environment. So that will be something that will be explored to make sure all the students, all young people know about CARICOM and those kind of opportunities that they have to go beyond just their country. of origin. And in terms of, one of the things I notice happening nowadays is that everybody is online, so you have to do a new campaign online. Social media is free, so you do a social media campaign. Many people don't have access. We just spoke about the cost of mobile and sexual communication. Many people don't have access to, we are still, everybody has a phone. I'm on my phone here, but I'm not like online, I'm using it for my notes. Who says I have money for a plan, right? So I think we do have to reconsider our traditional media, the talk shows, those kind of things, and using opportunities, like for example, we have this big drama on our passports. Why not use this opportunity to remind people that when you travel from an American country, you don't need to constantly have your passport stamped because, you know, this is the situation, etc. You can work, just have your passport stamped for whatever period of time. So it's something that we can consider to do that education aspect of it. And my question that I really want to answer is, when it comes to free movement, we have the CIP, Citizens by Investment, we have the Commonwealth. How are all these things taken into consideration to level the playing field between people from smaller countries who have limited resources? And resources, I include education, I include empowerment, not just actual resources and finances, but that's into your opportunities for education and your sense of how you exist in the world and your ability to move in the world. People from bigger countries have a different sense when they walk. When a Trinidadian walk or a Jamaican walk, they might have a different way of seeing themselves in the world than somebody from St. Vincent or St. Lucia who's in from a small island. So that may not apply to all citizens, but how do we manage all that movement, Commonwealth, CIP, all these things happening, and we say it's free movement, but we are kind of disadvantaged sometimes. How do you level the playing field?
Thanks, Maria. Leveling the playing field on free movement. Research has been conducted that does not necessarily show that Caribbean people are moving, in droves to another Caribbean country. Migration in the Caribbean is largely immigration that is to countries outside of the region. Yes, we do have persons coming from some countries to others, but that is not considered to be going to be creating a major problem. One of the issues that we have, and it really is an interesting debate because we continue to hear about high rates of unemployment, but there's a serious shortage of labor in a lot of the member states of CARICOM. I have not been able to spend enough time studying it myself as to why that is so. Why on the one hand you have high unemployment, and in the same country you're talking about a shortage of skills, and therefore the movement of skills from one country to the next is going to be one of the things that will influence that decision. CIP, I am not aware that at this stage there has been any major consideration for how citizenship by investment is going to impact on the free movement discussion. I think this is something for the heads that the heads have not yet articulated fully on, but I'm certain it will come. And on the question of Commonwealth, that's also a different debate because even in the Commonwealth, to travel to many Commonwealth countries globally, you need visas. So there is no automatic entry as we have in CARICOM. At least we started by ensuring that every CARICOM citizen has an automatic 6-month stay. There is no such thing across the Commonwealth. Those standards don't necessarily exist. A lot of it is bilateral, and if there is a bilateral agreement between St. Lucia and Namibia, and Namibia and St. Lucia decide that they both on reciprocity terms remove their visas, then that's what it is. So it's not coordinated in any way, and there's no Commonwealth position on that. So I do hope that the movement of people, and mind you, it's not a movement of skills because many people already have their skills certificate, right? So if you're one of those persons that fall under the many categories that were developed, you can get your skills certificate and move to another country. We're now talking about free movement of people. There will be no category of skills that will be determined. There may be a list of persons who at some point might come as a list of persons who may not be allowed to travel for various reasons. But the free movement of people come March 2024 is expected to be open to every citizen of the region. I see Ambassador Lansico and I see Mr. Potter.
Nice to see you again. Thanks for the lecture. Friends, it is a subject that has troubled me a lot, that lack of knowledge of what CARICOM is about, what CARICOM is. And in many of my writings, formal and informal, I have tried to address the matter. The main problem, Doctor, why people are not adequately informed about CARICOM is that we have not bothered to institute what we can call CARICOM and Caribbean integration studies from the primary school level. People have a habit of thinking that is when you go to secondary school, you begin to think and analyze. There's no big analysis in matters of understanding CARICOM and its origins. And I want to propose that from primary school, our children, our young children, should be introduced to what CARICOM is. I worked at the CARICOM Secretariat for 11 years. In fact, I almost had the pleasure of welcoming my comrade when he was about to come. He arrived soon after I left. So maybe I left a space for you there, comrade. We have to take ourselves a little more seriously and think of introducing something I can dub Caribbean, or let's call it CARICOM and Caribbean integration studies from the primary school level. Let's begin to put our primary school kids to think about matters of integration even before they enter secondary school. And I'm going to throw that challenge out tonight. I wanted the Honorable Albert Baptiste to hear me, but he's gone. I'll tell him so tomorrow morning because he's a man of much influence. But the Speaker of the House is here. And the Speaker is a powerful man in this country. And Dame Paulette is here. And our Taiwanese ambassador is here. We have to take this matter seriously and institute from the primary school level CARICOM studies in the curriculum. Thank you.
I do not agree more. And I think that is a matter that certainly can come up at the level of the Council for Human and Social Development. I did not go into the structures of CARICOM and the councils and so on. I didn't want to bore you with all of that formality. But there are councils where ministers meet to discuss certain issues and make certain decisions. And if that matter is brought up at the level of the council, I have no doubt that it will be taken seriously. Mr. Potter?
Good evening. We have heard a lot of talk over the years of the single market and economy. And while a lot of stress has been placed, perhaps, on trade and the market, I do not think that we have placed sufficient emphasis on the larger issue of the economy, actually developing our economy within the region as a single market and economy. Now, it has been noted here that from time immemorial, there has been the movement of capital in the region. There has been, time immemorial, perhaps preceding CARICOM. And we can only talk of some of the big names that we've Massey, etc., etc. However, the movement of capital, it appears to me, has to be coupled with the movement of labor and skills. Now, this has been touched on here. But I get the feeling that there has not been enough attention given, because while we talk about free movement, you can go into another country, spend 6 months. Trinidad, 6 months. Barbados, 6 months. St. Vincent, 6 months. But the serious issue of the movement of labor, the movement of skills, I think we have not given that serious enough attention, because from what I can gather and from my standpoint as a trade unionist and one who has practiced industrial relations, there still seems to me in various territories that protective and perhaps ill-conceived idea that I am protecting my little labor market within my little 238 square miles. I don't know, Dr. Alexis, if you want to shed a few thoughts on it.
You know, I remember I've been in so many conversations where I say to people, all politics is local, and the politics of skills and the politics of labor, and so it's perhaps one of those areas that simply, you know, it behooves our political leaders to remain broad-minded on those issues, because sometimes the local political pressures, you know, can create problems, I would imagine. The movement of labor in the Caribbean, I think, is something that has to be done. The Caribbean Congress of Labor is a partner, attends CARICOM heads of government meeting as part of civil society, and there have been a lot of conversations with them in terms of how to better manage, which is why when the skills certificates were being conceptualized, there were a number of categories of skills where individuals could gain their Caribbean skill certificate in certain areas. So that has been in practice. I think it suffers from what Mr. Charlemagne mentioned earlier. There continues to be a lack of information around those things. And who applies for a CARICOM skill certificate? There are some categories that are underserved. You know, some of the categories for farm workers, for example, is underserved in terms of people applying for skill certificates. You know, and part of it is because they probably simply don't know. And therefore we have a responsibility, member states and the Secretariat, we have a responsibility to inform the ordinary citizen of what exists. Because as I said in the address, it's pointless saying that we have rights if we don't even know that we do have rights. You know? So there must be that education, that public education must form part of it. When that happens, I think we will be on a better footing. The other part of what is happening that you might be interested in is the heads have now, as part of establishing their quasi-cabinet, have now established a new role on industrialization. And the president of Suriname has been given the quasi-cabinet responsibility for industrialization. So we're now in the process of putting together an industrialization policy for the Caribbean. Another interesting thing that is happening, because we have to know how it's going to impact labor, how it's going to impact our labor force, our populations. The heads have also been discussing, and decisions will be made pretty soon, on the establishment of a CARICOM Population Commission, to be able to study the population, study the dynamics of the population growth, the movement of the population. There are UN ECLAC reports that suggest that by 2037, our populations will begin to decrease in the Caribbean. Do you believe that? Our populations will begin to decrease. We are already plateauing, we're already flatlining in some countries. So that information is necessary for us to be able to plan effectively going forward. I see the mayor of Castries, I see a councillor there, and I also see. Okay, I will have you next.
Thank you. Just to remind you of a song which is even closer to us, Ashanti, when he said, either we swim together in Caribbean unity or drown alone in the deep blue Caribbean Sea. I think that one epitomizes CARICOM in a very, very powerful way. And it's something that we must not forget. I speak, though, of the fact that for us, CARICOM to be seen as important, the whole issue of equity in that whole CARICOM framework has to be given some level of focus. Importantly, I remember a particular Caribbean leader indicating that that particular country was not the ATM of other countries. Yet we forget that the shell. Yes, a prime minister. There's not a prime minister. There's a what? All right. So, all right. So I remember that very, very clearly. But what I'm actually saying is that when we look at the supermarket shelves of our small islands, it is actually flooded with the goods of other countries, whilst the goods of the very smaller islands do not stand a chance on the shelves of those other countries. And I believe that we have to give that some level of focus, because without doing that, we are not going to be moving together. And I believe that it is that level of inequity in the relationship with the act which also contributed to the downfall of the act. So we need to look at it, and we need to ensure that in our entire dialogue, that level of equity is made to bear in that relationship. Otherwise, it is going to stifle the global CARICOM.
Absolutely. The treaty has provisions, but unless we give those provisions legs, because there are provisions in the treaty for protection of the smaller countries, the less developed economies, but we have to give those legs. We have to work to ensure that those provisions in the treaty, those rights that are guaranteed in the treaty, are made practical. And unless we do that, again, which is why I spoke towards the end about moving from rhetoric to reality, because the rhetoric can be what is enshrined in the treaty. But if we don't pay attention to it, and if we only allow the goods coming from the bigger, what the treaty recognizes as the more developed countries, the treaty does talk about more developed countries and less developed countries. I won't comment on that. But unless we do that, we're simply going to allow ourselves to be, in economics there is something called price takers. We just seem to be good stakers, because the goods come onto our shelves and we have no way of placing our own goods on the shelves. So it's an important point, I think, one that we should pay attention to. I know the Governor General Emeritus wanted to make a point, so forgive me, I will have to ask Dr. Lucia to speak before anybody else.
Sorry. I just wanted to make a point that while we're talking about education and information, I think the failure is perhaps lies, at our own door. We know we have, for example, an ambassador to CARICOM. But the ambassador, I have to admit even myself, I'm not quite sure what the ambassador to CARICOM does. In other words, you have heads taking decisions at heads conferences. But at the national level, when the heads come back, what is in place for that information, these recommendations, to be disseminated to the general public. I mean, it's true, you have to learn probably if you introduce CARICOM integration, so in schools. Okay, they will learn the structures. They'll know there's the council, there's that. But the decisions that are actually taken, for example, was the last meeting there. How many solutions actually know what those decisions were, and what is the structure within, it has to be, of course, within government to ensure, and it should be a department of government who would disseminate the information, who would do the public education. So unless we have something, that structure at the national level in every member state, the implementation rate of CARICOM, which has always been described as woefully inadequate, will remain so. So it's one thing to have an ambassador to CARICOM, but, what do we get from it? What is the information? What is the public education? The skills you talked about. Every now and then, you do your CVQs and all that, you be able to travel and work. But what exactly, who pushes it? I mean, I know that the ambassador to CARICOM, she probably has two members of staff. But I mean, how do they interface with the general public? And in other words, what is the education component at the national level? And I'm saying not just for St. Lucia, because I'm sure it's probably the same in all member states. So I think maybe that is a requirement that governments in each member state set up a department in whichever ministry. I mean, it could be external affairs if you want. It could be right now the ambassador to CARICOM is in the office of the Prime Minister. But it could be external affairs, it could be education, it could be the Ministry of Education. All you need, but you need some structure, some unit that will then communicate. CARICOM Secretariat, people of St. Lucia, or St. Vincent. That's so. I just wanted to make that point.
Very, very well made, Governor General Emeritus. Very, very well made, and that's the thing. It has to be the entire chain has to ensure that the links are strong enough, because the Secretariat cannot do it alone. Member states have responsibility. The structures that we put in place, we have CARICOM ambassadors, we have CARICOM youth ambassadors, whose role really is to connect CARICOM to the young population of the region. And I don't know how well, I think, Lamont, you might have been a CARICOM youth ambassador at some point. Oh, your husband Chad was a CARICOM youth ambassador. So we have CARICOM youth ambassadors. I was told by the moderator that we can only take 2 more questions, and I saw Mr. Satney and Mr. Lucia. Oh, and Jim, we'll take 3. We'll take 3.
Okay. Just very quickly, 2 diverse points. And one of them is the film industry. And we see within CARICOM, the film industry is virtually dead. And in the 70s, Jamaica had a very vibrant film industry. But we look at St. Lucia, Trinidad, and Jamaica itself is not what it used to be. Haiti at one point showed promise. Now, what really brought that to the fore for me was with the strike of the writers in Hollywood. When I heard the numbers, it was to me so alarming. 160,000 writers. Now, we know our industry will not be able to compete with the US, but I'm saying I think it would fall on the responsibility of CARICOM, for instance, because of its position, to really give the film industry in the Caribbean a head start. We've seen Nigeria, we see where India is super big. There's a lot of money to be made there, but there's a lot of exposure for our young people harnessing their talents. And as far as it exists right now, it's a dead zone for films in the Caribbean. And I think something can be done, but it will take a sort of organization like CARICOM to show and to take the lead on that. But very quickly, another small point, the AMOC, and it's the super current, if you like, of the Atlantic. Last week, the scientists confirmed that their initial prediction that the AMOC would possibly collapse by 2095 is wrong. And there's a possibility that it may collapse as early as 2025. That's 2 years from now, and that would have disastrous consequences for the whole world, but particularly for the region. And I'm surprised that I had nothing from anyone on the region on the AMOC and the sort of impact it's going to have on our lives, and all of the things we talk about will effectively be futile. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Stanley. Let me just say that in as much as you don't see me taking notes, this entire session is being recorded. I really like the point about the film industry. This is something that I would certainly take back to office, along with all the other recommendations that you've made. So that's a very, very important point. And there are opportunities. Didn't the St. Lucia not recently win a major award and was awarded an honorary doctorate because of her work in the film industry? So we have talent in the region. We have talent right there in St. Lucia. So we have to make better use of it. So thanks for that. Starting the issue of climate change, again, I have not heard any specific comment on that, but there's a huge debate, and through the 5 Cs, the CARICOM Center for Climate Change, which is based in Belize, that's where much of our work on climate change is being coordinated, and there is also the Prime Ministerial Task Force. Various task forces that deal with issues of climate change. Just to inform you, again, public education, St. Lucia holds the CARICOM quasi-cabinet responsibility for sustainable development and climate change. St. Lucia holds the CARICOM quasi-cabinet responsibility for sustainable development and climate change. Remember, I just mentioned the industrial policy, and I told you it was the president of Suriname. Climate change and sustainable development is our own practice. Just in case we did not know. Now, we did say 2 more, but I saw, yes, so Mr. Satney, Mr. Montu, and Jim. Jim first, and Mr. Satney after.
Thank you, Doc. Very good presentation tonight. You spoke about industrialization. I think 2 questions back, and you mentioned it in your presentation. I don't know if many people realize, but we are in the 4th stage of what is called the Industrial Revolution, right? A very disruptive stage. Just like the previous iterations, the first one when we moved to steam engines from manual labor, then we moved to the use of telephones and electricity, and then in the 80s we had the personal computer and the internet. Now artificial intelligence and robotics, where you have the blurring of the lines between what is basically human and machines, a fusion of that, and there's rapid advancement in that. There have been major disruptions. Dame Paulette Luigi spoke about education, but the education sector, as we know it, has been impacted forever in terms of the way we disseminate information, in the way we understand and process information. Artificial intelligence is changing things to the extent what Stanley spoke about, the writer's strike. And today I was doing a workshop on artificial intelligence yesterday and today, where I was doing training for some business managers, including legal professions and professionals. And the use of artificial intelligence is changing everything, or has changed everything as we know it. And there'll be major disruptions in terms of employment, in terms of the way business is conducted. Europe has enacted a draft artificial intelligence policy, and they are moving ahead in terms of big data and all that, and putting systems in place because they understand what is coming. I am not hearing from a regional perspective, from a local perspective. I'm not hearing anything from our elected officials, from a national perspective in terms of our readiness and preparation for not what's coming, but what is there. And will have serious impact on the lives and livelihoods of our people, both positively and negatively. It seems that we are comatose. Either we are unaware of the potential of this technology and how disruptive it is, and somehow we are just waiting and hoping that it's going to go away. I think it's imperative that organizations like yourself seriously start to consider the impact of artificial intelligence and robotics, because it will affect our people. And just like Stanley Lucian was saying, we are in a unique position where we can be pioneers and take the initiative, and we can start developing ourselves to be able to take advantage of the opportunities and to put systems in place to mitigate the risks that we not are going to face, but are facing. And it's not something that is 5 years away. It is 2 years, it is 1 year away. In the next 2 years, you will have to ask yourself, what is the relevance of a PhD? You will have to ask yourself, what is the relevance of a college? Because with the advent of things like ChatGPT, and today, in fact, for the past few weeks, I've been doing lectures and workshops, and every single session that I have, persons' mouths have just dropped when I have shown them what the technology can do. And the question they ask themselves is, what is my relevance? Something that would take you 3 weeks to do, it does it for you in 2 seconds. And through the sessions, I've been speaking to them and explaining to them how they need to upskill themselves and retool themselves and to look at it differently in terms of their responsibility, in terms of their roles. And by the end of the session, everybody is like, oh yeah, I'm really excited about this because now I can really focus on what's really important. But it is very important that we start having that discussion before it is too late. And time is of the essence. What is CARICOM doing? That's my next question.
Okay, let me start by telling you that I wrote my lecture. It was not AI. Right? My lecture was not AI. Let me just start there. But all I can say, Jim, is the conversation has started. I know that there has been at least one meeting with our ICT officials on the issue of the impact of artificial intelligence. I don't have the latest information on how far that has gone, but it definitely has started, and certainly will be rolling out in a bigger way as we go forward. But it has. I have raised it myself at the executive management level that we need to be aware of the impact of AI on our existence in the Caribbean. So it's happening. Mr. Sapney, and then Mr. Montut, and I think Lavon, then you can take over from here.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Good evening. gain commendation for a great lecture. I think Jill and Dave Collett started the process which I wanted, and to a certain extent, Ambassador Gros. And that is somehow, I mean, many months ago I had some associations with CARICOM when I was in the public service. And to date, if I was to go back into the service and still deal with CARICOM, I would see a big difference. And that's just my own observation. The reason why I'm saying so is because I have not seen a significant and appreciation of the global pressures that are taking place around us and the dynamics of the geopolitics that is taking place. And I'll just mention a few examples, and it's not for you to kind of respond on. It's just really points that I think as a people we need to be aware of. For example, all the high levels of protectionism protectionist policies that are taking place among the OECD and more advanced and developed countries. Particularly, I'll just use one example, the immigration policies. If you realize, again, they are rapidly trying to have a significant brain drain of our skills and our human resources. Who's living? Nurses, other skilled young persons. Canada has work and study programs. The UK, look at what is happening. So we need to begin to appreciate the impact of these things, not just for now, but for the next 10, 15 years, and what it's going to have on the development of the Caribbean, and what implications it has for the very CSME that we speak of. That is just one. The other issue I wanted to note, and I will not, but areas such as health, security, regional and national security. The issue, you touched base on the issue of the climate change, but again, not just climate change for climate change's sake, but its implications on food security, food and nutrition security. These are the issues that we need to begin to really challenge ourselves about how these things. It is one thing dealing with the theoretical issues and what it is all about, but how does it impact the grassroots, the person in Cannes, the person in Soisel, the person in Soufrière, Vieux-Fort? How these things are going to impact on those people has to reach, and that is where I think CARICOM on its own, as a grouping, and national governments on their own also need to begin to, we need to ask ourselves those kind of questions. And my second big point is, going forward, I think we need to begin to figure out how do we democratize CARICOM, right? To get persons, I think we started by saying, begin to teach kids at primary school level about what is CARICOM and the whole issue of West Indian history and the development of our people, right? But I think the EU has done something similar in the last 5 or 10 years. What they've done is they have a special program in which they try to get to all local communities, whether it be scientific, whether it be schools, whether it be NGOs, to encourage them to submit special programs and the needs that they have to solve problems, right? And I think we need to have some section or some unit or organ so that we can begin to do that. For example, use the organs like Cardi in food security issues and so on. How do we promote backyard gardening and all those kinds of things? So that is the sort of level I'm talking about, right? So we need to democratize it so that it gets to the level at the ground, to the people who are going to be affected by it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sabri. And as I call Mr. Montu, let me just say very quickly on the issue of democratizing. There is a CARICOM charter of civil society. The Secretary General has just appointed someone in her office to give life to that treaty. So again, you're going to be hearing a little more on that, to bring non-state actors into some kind of role within CARICOM. So that's going to happen. I am sure many of you have heard 25 by 25. I'm sure many of you have heard that the Caribbean community is aiming to reduce its food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. It's called the 25 by 25 initiative, and it has to do with food security. It has to do with finding ways to reduce the cost of inputs into food and ensuring that our people can survive in this region. These are just two very quick responses I wanted to give before I call on.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, I want you to share your experience when you first stepped in the office, in the Barbados office, and Deputy Chairman. Share your experience with the project.
I was trying to get rid of some, emotional living. No, I can share my experience having entered CARICOM. And I think in the introduction, the young Mr. Alexis probably would have done really well. Because for me, it was about, what were the odds when I was really just, having a rock grocery, had no idea what I was going to do with my life, that, I would have ended up in that position. And when I joined the Secretariat and I met so many solutions, including Mr. Montu's son, who works with CARICOM in the office in Barbados, the CSA office, I also reflected on the fact that when we give our citizens opportunities to shine and perform, that is the only way in which you can tell what metal we're made of. Anybody could have dismissed me as, does this fellow from grocery? We already know what he's doing. There's, always around NYC, this, that, the other, getting trouble here and there, and so on. But that's what helped shape me, and that's what helps shape a lot of other young people. And maybe Ambassador Lansico worked in the CARICOM Secretariat for 11 years. 11 years. And you see people come and go all the time. What is important is that we all have a contribution to make. And I sincerely believe that the best way to develop the human capital of this region is to give people an opportunity. We tend to be, and I remember making the point at the CARICOM Secretariat that perhaps we were more youth-friendly in the CARICOM Secretariat 20, 30 years ago. The very Secretary General today was appointed Deputy Secretary General at age 30 something, 36 or 37. And I ask myself, if a 35, 36-year-old shows up today, would we take that chance on a 30-year-old today that our society took on a 30-year-old 30 years ago? And as somebody who grew out of the youth movement in Gros and in St. Lucia, my passion is to see that we give our young people more opportunities. And those who have done well professionally, those who continue to show their talents in the creative arts, etc., there is no better gift that we can give to the citizens of the Caribbean, but a chance to reach the higher heights that the skill set and the education can allow them to reach. That's as much as I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. much, Dr. Alexis. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. And now on Councillor Linda Charles Ambrose to do the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to recognize the protocol which has already been established, but I would like to recognize a few people we have here tonight. Speaker of the House of Assembly, Honorable Claudius Francis, Senator Lisa Jawahir, former Governor General Dame Paulette Louisi, Ambassador for the Republic of China on Taiwan, His Excellency Peter Chan and Mrs. Chan, and other members of your mission, other members of the diplomatic corps, including Ambassador Peter Lansico, Mayor of Gros constituency, His Worship Edward Lucia, Mayor of Castries, Her Worship Geraldine Glendor Gabriel, Chairperson of the Babonneau Constituency Council, Mrs. Lucy Gasper, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My task this evening is to thank our very distinguished lecturer, the son of the Gros soil, in case you all didn't know. Yes, AA, and I'm saying AA, I'll explain that later. So the Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, who is now based in Guyana, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, his initials are AA. And you know what A stands for, right? Excellence. So, this gentleman over there, the son of Rosalie soil, he was born to be great. Some have greatness thrust upon them. And this greatness has been thrust upon him by the CARICOM Secretariat. Now they say some are born great. Was he born great? I think so. His initials are AA. So every time you say AA, if you miss a call and you say A, think of our deputy. He's right over there. Okay? Some achieve greatness, and I know he worked very hard to be where he is today. Did you know he was an educator as well? I'm not talking about an educator who sings calypso, but he was an educator, and he taught my son. Imagine that. You remember that? You remember? Okay, he did. Now, on the theme of emancipation, Bob Marley talked about emancipating ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Has that happened? Sadly, no. Not 100%. But thankfully, we have somebody right here in our midst, based at the CARICOM Secretariat, who will help us in the CARICOM region to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. So your task is huge. Dr. AA is huge. Remember that. AA. Okay? So I would like to thank some other people who made this lecture this evening possible. And the first one I would like to thank is your son, Master Alexis, who did a great introduction of his father. I am sure you're thinking, this is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Right? You didn't tell him that.
So I'd also like to thank members of the Gros Constituency Council who made this possible. GIS, you came here to cover this event, thank you very much. The music gentleman over there, J&D Sounds. And I'd like to thank all of you here who took the time off from the street party down the road where you can get the spirit of Lucia. And those of you who asked very relevant questions, thank you very much. You made the evening even more enjoyable. So, without further ado, I would like to say good evening, everyone. And please remember to enjoy yourself at the street party. It's just down the road. Thank you.
We are joined by the cabinet. I forget the mic. I did that deliberately just to see if you'd have noticed that, so everybody's still alert. But yes, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our cabinet secretary with us. Also, by a slight extension, I'd like to thank each of you for joining, for staying, and for engaging. This more or less sums up all of our plans for you this evening. We encourage you to join us in some light refreshments to the back. We hope that this evening allowed for some good thought, some good perspective, and it is the start of some very important conversation. So please get home safely. You could even visit Friday night. And just before I end, we have a surprise for Dr. Alexis. So Dr. Alexis, if you join me to the front, with your eyes closed somehow without knocking the table, walking into the table, we have something to give you.
Good evening, everyone. It is with great humbling honor that I present this token on behalf of the parliamentary representative and the Gros Constituency Council. This token of appreciation to you, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, for this very educational, informative lecture on CARICOM. I know not one person here would be leaving without some form of information that he didn't know before entering this space. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it says a token of our appreciation, of our profound gratitude, to Dr. Armstrong Alexis, presenter of the 50th anniversary of CARICOM lecture, Gros Constituency Council, with today's date, and the emblem of the Gros Conference. Thank you very much.